You're watching Doc Review with me, Camelia Shambayati. In today's show, we're discussing 69 Minutes of 86 Days, directed by award-winning Norwegian filmmaker Egil Haaskjold Larsen. And joining me in the studio, we have Maria Duarte, who is a film critic for the Morning Star newspaper and who has also worked as a news journalist in both television and radio for many years. And beside her is Zita Holborn, who is the co-founder and national chair of Aparat UK and has been coordinating solidarity, aid and fact-finding missions in support of refugees in France for over 2 years. Now, 69 Minutes of 86 Days is a documentary about the hardships of being a refugee as seen through a child's eyes. With minimal dialogue, the director takes us into the journey of 3-year-old Syrian child Liane and shows her family trekking through Europe with the goal of reuniting with her grandfather to settle in Sweden. Now let's have a look at our first clip. First of all, welcome both of you to the show. Thanks very much for coming on. Now, I have to say, I thought this was a magnificent documentary, extremely moving, and it's the kind of documentary that stays with you for days, especially because it was told from a child's perspective. Now, Maria, if I could start with you as our guest film critic, what was your impression of this documentary?
Well, it does stay with you, and I found that it was one of the most unique documentaries on the refugee crisis that I've seen, and actually quite an impressive directorial debut by Larsen himself. He was a cameraman, he was a cinematographer, and you can tell that in the way that it's shot. And what's interesting is that he shot it from her perspective and her height. So the camera moves with her. And it's very intriguing and inspiring use of putting this story across. And it's quite a humanizing way of looking at it. Mm-hmm. And the little girl is well, adorable. And the fact is that there are no voiceovers, there's no narration, you have no idea what's going on, very much like the little girl herself, Liane. She has no idea. You know, at 3, you go where you're taken. And for her, in many ways, it was kind of like a game, although at times the camera kind of stays on her and she looks really, really serious.
I wanted to ask you actually a bit more about that point, about the style of the filmmaking, because the Larsen does use low-angle, steady cam shots mixed with long takes, as you were saying. And do you think that the director Larsen was successful in trying to transfer the child's experience to the viewer in this way?
Well, I think so, because you can see her energy and her hope and her childlike wonderment. When the film opens, it's a tracking shot of the beach and you see all these things strewn on it. You have no idea what's coming or where it's going, and then it kind of tracks up. You see all these refugees queuing up, they're being given flip-flops, they're being given food, and then it hones in on her and her look and what's going through her little mind. We have no idea, you know, it's a child's world, but to her, you know, it's all games as well, but she knows that she's being taken from her home to Sweden, and that's how we learn about it, because at no point are you told where they are, where they're going really, apart from a song that she sings where she says, oh, we're going to Sweden in Germany to live with Grandpa, you know.
That was a really endearing moment.
Yeah,
I think it was there to help keep her going through that journey. And Zita, I want to bring you in here. What was your impression of the film? Do you agree with Maria's take?
I agree with quite a bit of what Maria has said. I think it was quite endearing to show it through the eyes of a child in the way it was shot. It was a unique perspective that we don't normally see or hear. Usually the times we hear about children are in a very technical way, as you know, unaccompanied minors, or when they've tragically died. So it was positive to see it from the perspective of a child, but I also think that in some places, you know, the narrative was missing. But you have to look at what the purpose of the film was, and was it to do what lots of other people have done before, or was it to do something different and to show this perspective on it?
No, I agree with you actually, and I want to explore those details a bit later on in terms of how powerful that impact had by having minimal dialogue. But for now, we're going to take a brief break from the discussion as we take a look at a clip from 69 Minutes of 86 Days, which shows 3-year-old Leanne walking through a refugee camp with her family. She's such a cute, gorgeous little girl, Leanne, and as a viewer, I feel like you feel the need to protect her in that hostile world that she's in. And Maria, you were touching upon this a bit earlier on. What are some of the hardships that we witness Leanne and her family encounter on their journey?
Well, there's an interesting shot of them all being sort of held against a barrier and the police kind of treating these refugees as cattle, really. And you kind of think, oh, that this isn't on, you know, this isn't right. But I don't think that's what the film wants to show you. I think it wants to show you the fact that they don't know what's happening. She doesn't know what's happening. It's crazy. It's frightening in many ways, and it's disorientating. So hence why there's no narration. You have no idea where they are at any given time, what country they're in.
Do you think this is a metaphor in general? Sorry, as the viewers, that we sympathise with Leanne because it's a metaphor for the Western audience's general ignorance of the issue, perhaps, that we don't know where they are, what's happening.
Well, exactly, yes, in some ways. And also that she's an ordinary little girl. She's got a backpack from the film Frozen. You know, this could be any of us at any given time. And basically to come to terms, sort of empathise with her situation. The thing is, we've seen films where you see children being, treated horrifically, and so this is a different way of getting the message across, and poignantly. And with this 3-year-old girl, and she is very cinematic. I mean, she's gorgeous to look at. and very sweet and very cute and very funny. There's a scene where she's playing with her sister and she's, giving her a lollipop, and the whole thing is that the family are trying to keep it as normal as possible, but it isn't a normal situation.
And Zita, from your experience working with refugees and refugee children, what kind of conditions are they enduring and kind of problems that they have on their journey?
Well, they're going through horrific conditions and experiences. What we didn't see in the film for Leanne is some of the experiences that refugee children that I've met and worked with, where they're having to cross deserts, where they're having to go on very small boats in perilous conditions across the Mediterranean Sea. And effectively, the families are risking their lives to get them to a safe place. They're staying in very harsh conditions, where at the moment, if you look at what's happening in Calais with both of the camps destroyed, people don't have tents. They're staying outside. The police have been stealing their blankets and their sleeping bags if they get them, and stripping those away from them. They were over the last few months, they've had a 1-hour slot in which they can access a tank of water to have a wash in front of hundreds of people. So actually the conditions are stark. When there wasn't an infrastructure in Dunkirk and particularly in Calais, there was a school and an art school, and so there was some system in place for children to have, snippets of normality.
So would you say that Leanne is one of the lucky ones that got away?
If you look at her journey in the film, the bits that we see of it, seems to be quite a positive journey compared to some of the refugee children I've met. I'm not saying it's completely positive, because obviously a long journey like that, there are risks all the way. It's tiring. You're staying in tents and camps and so on, so it's not easy. But I also think, I don't quite agree with you in terms of Leanne's naivety. I think actually she's very intelligent and very articulate. And if you listen to the little things she says and the little songs she sings, you can see actually she is reflecting on her conditions, particularly on the coach when she talks about what happened to the cat. Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was really engaging. I wish I saw more of those scenes. But we'll just have to pause there for now. We'll pick up this on the next part of the discussion as we take a look now at another clip from the documentary, 69 Minutes of 86 Days, which shows Leanne playing with her uncle on a bus. So as we were saying before we went to that clip, we do enjoy watching these tender, sweet moments with Leanne, and these precious moments. I think they give us a sense of relief from the harsh reality of a refugee's life. Maria, the director, Larsen, said at the Copenhagen Film Festival earlier this year that in this film he didn't want to focus so much on the political aspect of the refugee crisis. He wanted to focus more on a child's perspective and sort of gives some hope, I suppose, to their situation. Do you think that the film should have been more political, though?
It's an interesting question. The thing is, if it had been more political, then it would have been like every other documentary that we've seen on the refugee crisis. He was trying to get his point of view across by Leanne, and he succeeded that to a certain extent. The thing is that it is a snapshot of what they went through. We don't know what the rest of it was like. You know, anyone who has a 3-year-old, to keep them entertained for 86 days, I'm sorry, but it would be a nightmare, you know. The thing is, we need to be hopeful, but we need to change people's attitudes, and people are now kind of entrenched about the Syrian refugee crisis, sadly, and this is a different way of putting it across to engage people in that discussion and to look at it. Like it is, you know, we're like voyeurs in this film, and what we see is what he's allowing us to see. So the rest may have not been as touching or, you know, as moving or as sweet as the scenes that we saw. It would be interesting to see, you know, as I said, keeping a 3-year-old entertained or protected from what's going on is really difficult. Their attention span is very short.
And I think Larsen used the child though on purpose, in the sense that she's untainted by the world and she's an innocent, pure soul. So she doesn't know the differences with the cultural and political conflicts.
No.
So in a sense, it gives you a sort of humanistic approach, I think,
Indeed.
to the refugee crisis.
And you need to put a face on it. That's the thing. You've got to humanise people. You know, you can't just say, you know, bunch Syrian refugees as a whole. These are people just like you and like us, going through terrible ordeal, you know, to have to move from, you know, your country to somewhere completely foreign. My parents did it, you know, in the 60s, and my mother kind of never got over it really, because it was a completely different culture coming to Britain. Circumstances you can't. They're not comparable, but what I'm saying is if you have to leave your home, and in their case they're forced to leave their home to go somewhere else, and people are not giving them the respect that they kind of deserve, or the kindness, do you see what I mean?
No, I see what you mean. It's a really good point.
It's, you know, we're supposed to, you know, care for everyone. We're supposed to care for each other, and we've become, you know, in the world now where it's every man and woman for themselves.
And Zita, I just wanted to read a statistic here about refugees. So according to the UN Refugee Agency, 86% of the world's refugees are hosted by developing countries. So the countries hosting the most refugees are Turkey, home to some 2.5 million, Pakistan 1.6 million, Lebanon 1.1 million, and Iran around 1 million. Now, what do you think of the Western world's efforts in sheltering and accommodating the refugees? Do you think they could be doing a better job?
It could definitely be doing far more than they're doing. Actually, the UK record is woeful. You know, for 2 years I've been working with people who are refugees in France, who are stuck in limbo effectively, trying to get to the UK. Many of them are children. The average age currently of the people that are there, if you want to call them adults, is around age 17 or 18. So this is very young people that have left home when they were children, have struggled and travelled alone, may have lost all their family members, have had to form bonds and family to travel across Europe to try and get to a safe place, and are being separated from their families and connections here in the UK. And then all the scapegoating and demonising of migrants, and trying to blame the cuts and austerity impact that we're experiencing here on migrants is an absolute disgrace. We've had the Immigration Act introduced in the UK, which is like you know, seeks to create an apartheid-like state. And then even when people are here, we're seeing mass deportations to countries like Jamaica, Nigeria and Pakistan. So yes, the UK and other European Western countries could do far more. They are not demonstrating humanity, and actually I think that's what we saw in the film. We saw the human story, we saw humanity, we saw the reality of a family trying to shield and protect their children, and you could see the sadness, pain and fear in the eyes of the adults, but they tried to protect the children from that, and you know, keep things positive so that the children, and particularly Leanne, could have hope for a better future.
Thank you for that point. It was a really good point. I want to touch more on what you were saying about the anti-refugee sentiment across Europe. But now we're just going to take a look at our final clip from the documentary. We're discussing 69 minutes of 86 days, which lets us experience another part of Leanne's journey.
بابا بابا
Now we're in the final part of the discussion of this programme now, and I just want to talk a little bit about how in the documentary there isn't no specific reference to the country of origin of the refugees. Do you think Larsen did this in an attempt to perhaps internationalise the refugee issue?
Maybe, but also to keep you disorientated in a way, like they were. We assume that they started off from a Greek port and then they go through, I think they went through Hungary and Austria and then Germany and then on to Sweden. But you have no idea where they're going or what the passage of time actually. You know, and only by the signposts and people speaking in German do you realise they're in Germany. So that's basically to keep it, you know, to keep you on your toes and to give you the experience or part of the experience that they went through, because Leanne had no idea where she was going.
And Zita, would you agree with Maria's take?
Not necessarily. I can't speculate on why it was done like that and why it wasn't mentioned. You know, within a few minutes, I'd figured out that's where they were from anyway, because I could hear them speaking and, you know, I can look at them and guess where they're from. But actually, I think the important part of the film wasn't about, he wasn't trying to tell their backstory and what they were fleeing from. There was no focus on that. It was about the journey you go on as a refugee. So all people who are refugees are going through those same trials and tribulations and challenges, and you know, it's tiring, it's long, it's challenging. So I think that the focus was on, this is what you're going through. Here is a family who are a tight family, who are supporting each other, looking after each other. They're a loving family. You know, they're embracing their children, they're sticking together, and this is what you have to do to get through a perilous and long and difficult journey, which is not just physically difficult,
yes, it's
but actually mentally and spiritually.
And psychologically, definitely. But I just wanted to ask you, a lot of people would argue that, in fact, the refugees getting to their destination in Europe is actually not the hardest part, given the rise of the increase in anti-refugee, anti-immigrant sentiment in Europe, with far-right groups, for example. Do you think it's likely that children such as Leanne will face a lot of racism and abuse once they settle in the countries?
Absolutely. Actually, I sat, you know, as the credits came up at the end of the film thinking, okay, this is all very fairy tale, happily ever after. This is not the reality of what people go through as refugees, or even migrating, you know, where my families came and migrated to the UK. She will face discrimination, and often young people that I meet who are refugees in France, they ask, what's it like in the UK? It's better there, and it's going to be better for us, and it's going to be better equality. And I'm truthful to them. I tell them what I do as an activist, that actually my entire life has been dedicated to campaigning against racism and prejudice and xenophobia, because we're still facing those challenges. So it won't be easy for her. It's going to be challenging.
So Marie, would you like to see a follow-up documentary to see how Leanne's life would play out?
It would be interesting, but again, if he's going to go for this style of documentary, then, you know, it's cinematic, basically. But I suspect as a 3-year-old, I mean, I was 10 months old when I came to Britain, you get used to your surroundings, and, you know, you become part of society, and you forget what...
You integrate.
You integrate there. And she's 3, and she will presumably integrate. But yeah, it's
Perhaps many challenges lie ahead. And
Indeed,
we'll just have to...
and it's scary times at the moment, and also post-Brexit, I have to say. So
scary times indeed. And I'm afraid we'll have to end it there, but thank you very much. I enjoyed this discussion of the documentary. And that's it for this episode of Doc Review. Thanks to my guests and to you for watching. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and Facebook, where you can find us on @DocReviewShow. Do let us know your views on today's film, and feel free to suggest documentaries you would like us to review. I've been Camelia Shambayati, and see you on the next episode of Doc Review.